November 29, 1944. Omura Bay, Kyushu, Japan. The explosion echoed across the water. Engine number 3 was burning. Captain Howard Jarrell fought the controls of his B-29 Superfortress, callsign Ramp Tramp, as black smoke poured from the Wright R-3350 engine. They had just bombed the Nakajima aircraft factory in Tokyo. Now, 1,500 miles from safety, the mechanical marvel of American engineering was dying. "We're losing altitude," the co-pilot screamed over the intercom. Jarrell's hands trembled. This wasn't just any aircraft. The B-29 was America's most guarded secret, a $600,000 flying fortress that had taken 4 years and billions of dollars to develop. Inside its aluminum skin were technological marvels the Japanese had never seen: pressurized cabins, remote-controlled gun turrets, analog computers for bombing calculations, and fuel systems so complex they required engineering manuals the size of encyclopedias. "Bail out! Bail out!" Jarrell ordered. But it was too late. The B-29 struck the cold waters of Omura Bay with devastating force. The impact killed 3 crew members instantly. Jarrell and 7 survivors swam toward shore, knowing what awaited them: capture, interrogation, possibly execution. On the beach, Japanese soldiers watched the massive bomber settle into the shallow water, its silver wings jutting above the surface like the ribs of a beached whale. They had no idea they had just captured the key to America's strategic air war. Within hours, Imperial Navy engineers would descend upon the wreckage. What they would discover inside would shock them to their core and expose the staggering technological gap between 2 warring nations. The B-29 was never meant to exist. In 1938, when Boeing first conceived the idea of a long-range strategic bomber, critics called it impossible. The U.S. Army Air Corps demanded an aircraft that could fly 5,000 miles, carry 2,000 pounds of bombs, and operate at altitudes above 30,000 feet, specifications that defied the laws of physics and engineering of the time. Boeing's engineers worked in secrecy. They designed pressurized compartments so crews could breathe at high altitude without oxygen masks. They installed 4 massive Wright R-3350 duplex Cyclone engines, each producing 2,200 horsepower, engines so powerful and temperamental they earned the nickname "Wrong Engine" among mechanics. These engines ran so hot they frequently caught fire mid-flight. The aircraft's defensive armament was revolutionary: 12.50 caliber machine guns and one 20mm cannon controlled by a centralized fire control system. A gunner could operate multiple turrets simultaneously using a sophisticated analog computer that calculated bullet trajectory, wind speed, and target movement in real time. By 1944, Boeing had produced over 3,000 B-29s. Each one cost more than a battleship's main gun turret. The Manhattan Project, developing the atomic bomb, consumed $2 billion. The B-29 program consumed $3 billion, the most expensive weapons program in history at that point. But the Japanese knew almost nothing about it. Intelligence reports described it as a large bomber, nothing more. Imperial engineers had examined crashed aircraft before, but never a B-29. Never intact. Never with its systems preserved. The bomber in Omura Bay was different. Despite the crash, much of its technology remained functional, waiting to be dissected. Commander Kiro Honjo received the telegram at 0400 hours. American super bomber down. Omura Bay. Intact. Come immediately. Honjo was Japan's leading aviation engineer, a graduate of Tokyo Imperial University who had studied in Germany before the war. He had examined Spitfires, Mustangs, even a captured Soviet Yak-9. But the B-29 was mythical. It appeared over Japan in June 1944 and had been bombing factories, ports, and cities with impunity ever since, flying too high for Japanese fighters to intercept. When Honjo arrived at Omura Bay, he stood in silence. The bomber was colossal, 99 feet long with a 141-foot wingspan. It dwarfed Japan's largest bomber, the G-8N Renzen, which had never entered production due to material shortages. "Get it out of the water," Honjo ordered. "Carefully. I want every wire, every bolt, every instrument preserved." It took 2 days. Navy divers worked around the clock, attaching flotation bags and cables. On December 1st, cranes lifted the B-29 onto a barge. Water poured from the fuselage. Honjo's team covered it with tarps to hide it from American reconnaissance planes that flew over daily. The bomber was transported to the Yokosuka Naval Arsenal, Japan's primary naval research facility. There, in a guarded hangar, Honjo assembled a team of 47 engineers, metallurgists, and technicians. Their orders were simple: disassemble everything, learn everything, copy everything. But Honjo knew the truth. Japan lacked the aluminum, the precision tools, the electrical components, and the fuel to replicate this machine. Still, they had to try. Understanding the enemy's technology might reveal weaknesses they could exploit. The first discovery came within hours. When engineers pried open the B-29's access panels, they found something unexpected. The wings were hollow chambers filled with self-sealing fuel tanks. But more shocking were the auxiliary systems crammed inside: hydraulic pumps, electrical conduits, oxygen lines, and fire suppression equipment, all integrated into a single structural assembly. "It's not a bomber," one engineer whispered. "It's a flying factory." The pressurization system fascinated Honjo. American engineers had created 3 separate pressurized compartments: forward crew section, gunner's compartment, and tail gunner position, connected by a narrow tunnel just 34 inches in diameter. This meant the crew could operate in shirt sleeves at 30,000 feet, where outside temperatures dropped to -60 degrees Fahrenheit. Japanese bombers had no such luxury. Crews wore heavy flight suits and oxygen masks, limiting their effectiveness on long missions. Frostbite and hypoxia were constant dangers. The bomb bay revealed another innovation: pneumatically operated doors that opened in 2 seconds, minimizing drag and allowing precision bombing at high speed. Japanese bombers used manual cranks that took 20 seconds, leaving aircraft vulnerable to fighters. Then came the fire control system. The Central Fire Control (CFC) system was operated by a gunner using a General Electric analog computer sight. He could rotate turrets, adjust for altitude, temperature, and target velocity, all while multiple gunners shared targeting data through an intercom system. "How is this possible?" a young technician asked, examining the electrical wiring. "There are miles of cables." Honjo measured the wiring. Over 9 miles of electrical cables snaked through the aircraft, controlling everything from gun turrets to landing gear. Japan's best bomber, the Ki-67, had less than 1 mile of wiring. Engine number 3, the one that caused the crash, lay disassembled on a workshop floor. Honjo and his team stood over it like surgeons examining an alien organism. The Wright R-3350 was a masterpiece of engineering and a nightmare of complexity. An 18-cylinder radial engine with 2 rows of 9 cylinders, it produced 2,200 horsepower at takeoff. Each cylinder had 4 valves, dual spark plugs, and its own fuel injection system. The supercharger used a 2-stage system that compressed air before forcing it into the combustion chambers. "These engines catch fire," Honjo noted, reading an intelligence report. American crews call them over-temp specials. The problem was evident. The R-3350 ran at extreme temperatures. Cylinder head temperatures exceeded 500 degrees Fahrenheit. The Japanese had nothing comparable. Their best engine, the Mitsubishi Ha-214, produced 2,000 horsepower but was prone to overheating and mechanical failure. Mass production was impossible due to material shortages. But what stunned Japanese engineers was the precision manufacturing. Tolerances were measured in thousandths of an inch. Pistons fit cylinders with gaps so small that Japanese micrometers couldn't measure them accurately. The crankshaft weighed 315 pounds and was machined from a single forging with a precision that required machine tools Japan didn't possess. "We cannot build this," the lead metallurgist admitted. "We lack the aluminum alloys, the precision lathes, the trained machinists. Even if we had the plans, production would take years." Honjo nodded grimly. He had suspected as much. But understanding the B-29's weaknesses was still valuable. If the engines were so temperamental, perhaps Japanese fighters could force prolonged combat, overheating the engines and causing failures. The Norden bomb sight sat in pieces on an examination table. This device, worth more than its weight in gold, was America's most closely guarded bombing secret. Guards were ordered to destroy it before capture. Somehow, Ramp-Tramp's bombardier had failed to do so before bailing out. The Norden was an analog computer that used gyroscopes, gears, and mirrors to calculate the exact moment to release bombs, compensating for wind speed, altitude, aircraft velocity, and even the Earth's rotation. American bombardiers trained for months to use it. It could theoretically drop a bomb into a pickle barrel from 20,000 feet. "This is witchcraft," a Japanese technician muttered, watching the gyroscope spin. But Honjo understood. It was mathematics and precision engineering. The problem was replication. The Norden required optical glass of exceptional quality, precision-machined gears with tolerances Japan couldn't achieve, and gyroscopes balanced so perfectly they spun for hours without deviation. In the bomb bay, engineers found another revelation: the bombs themselves. The B-29 had carried M64 500-pound general-purpose bombs and M47 100-pound incendiary clusters. The incendiaries were particularly terrifying, thin-walled cylinders filled with napalm and white phosphorus that scattered on impact, creating firestorms that consumed entire city blocks. Japan's wooden cities were perfect targets. Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, all were vulnerable. The March 1945 firebombing of Tokyo, which killed over 100,000 people, was still 3 months away. But examining these weapons, Honjo could see what was coming. "We need to warn Tokyo," he told his superiors. "These bombers aren't just attacking military targets. They're designed to burn cities." The warning was ignored. While engineers dissected the bomber, Captain Howard Jarrell and his 7 surviving crew members sat in cells at Ofuna Interrogation Center. They were beaten daily. The Japanese wanted information. How many B-29s were operational? Where were they based? What were their next targets? Jarrell gave only name, rank, and serial number. According to the Geneva Convention, that's all he was required to provide. But Japan hadn't signed the Geneva Convention. The interrogations grew more brutal. One navigator, Lieutenant James Ryan, broke after 3 days of sleep deprivation and beatings. He revealed the B-29s were based in the Mariana Islands, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, 1,500 miles from Tokyo. He described the 1,500-mile missions, the 12-hour flights, the exhaustion crews faced. But he lied about one critical detail. He told interrogators the B-29s could carry 10,000 pounds of bombs. The actual capacity was 20,000 pounds. That lie might save thousands of Japanese lives if it caused military planners to underestimate American capabilities. Back at Yokosuka, Honjo's team worked 18-hour days. They photographed every component, measured every dimension, and cataloged every system. But progress was slow. The B-29's complexity exceeded anything they had encountered. Then came the discovery that would haunt Honjo forever. Inside the rear fuselage, engineers found personal effects, photographs of crew members' families, letters from home, a Bible with handwritten notes. One photo showed a young woman holding a baby. Written on the back, "Come home safe. We love you. Mary and Sarah." Honjo held the photograph. These weren't monsters. They were men, like him, fighting for their country. Men with families. Men who would probably be executed once interrogations concluded. He placed the photo in his pocket. After the war, he would try to return it. By mid-December 1944, Honjo's team had produced a 342-page technical report. The conclusions were devastating. Japan was not losing the war because of inferior strategy or courage. Japan was losing because of an insurmountable technology gap. The B-29 used materials Japan couldn't produce, high-grade aluminum alloys requiring bauxite Japan didn't have, electrical systems needing copper Japan had exhausted, hydraulic fluids requiring petroleum Japan lacked, and synthetic rubber for tires and seals that Japan's chemical industry couldn't manufacture. Even the instruments were superior. American altimeters were accurate to 50 feet. Japanese altimeters varied by 500 feet. American airspeed indicators were temperature compensated. Japanese versions became inaccurate in extreme cold or heat. "We are fighting 21st century technology with 19th century industry," Honjo wrote in his report. "American factories are producing one B-29 every 90 minutes. We are producing one Ki-67 bomber every 3 days. The outcome is inevitable." His superiors rejected the report. Admitting inferiority was unthinkable. Instead, they ordered Honjo to focus on weaknesses. He obliged. The R-3350 engines were vulnerable to sustained combat. The fire control system could be jammed with radio interference. The pressurized fuselage was fragile. A single 20mm shell could cause catastrophic decompression. But these weaknesses were academic. Japanese fighters struggled to reach the B-29's operating altitude. The few that did found the bombers too fast, too well armed, and too numerous. By late 1944, Japan was losing 10 fighters for every B-29 shot down. The war was already over. Japan just didn't know it yet. March 9, 1945. 11:30 p.m. Tokyo. 334 B-29s appeared over Tokyo, flying at just 5,000 feet, loaded with M69 incendiary clusters. The low-altitude mission was risky but necessary. Major General Curtis LeMay had studied Honjo's captured B-29 reports, leaked by a Japanese officer who wanted the war to end. LeMay knew the Japanese had identified high-altitude vulnerabilities. So he did the unexpected. He stripped the guns to carry more bombs. He flew low to increase accuracy. He targeted residential areas, not factories, because Tokyo's cottage industries were integrated into neighborhoods. The result was apocalyptic. Over 1,800 tons of incendiaries created a firestorm that reached 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Canals boiled. Glass melted. People suffocated in underground shelters as fires consumed oxygen. In 6 hours, 16 square miles of Tokyo burned. Over 100,000 people died, more than either atomic bomb would kill. Honjo watched from a hilltop 20 miles away. The sky glowed orange. He thought of the photograph in his pocket, the woman and child waiting for a bomber crewman who would never come home. He thought of Japanese families dying in the flames below. This was what the B-29 was designed for. Not precision strikes on military targets. Mass destruction. Total war. "We should have surrendered," he whispered. "After I saw that bomber, I knew we couldn't win. We should have surrendered." But Japan didn't surrender. Not after Tokyo. Not after Osaka, Nagoya, or Kobe were burned. The war would continue 4 more months, until something even more terrible arrived in B-29 bomb bays. August 6, 1945. 8:15 a.m. Hiroshima. A single B-29 named Enola Gay dropped a 9,700-pound uranium bomb nicknamed Little Boy. The explosion obliterated 4 square miles and killed 70,000 people instantly. 3 days later, another B-29, Bockscar, dropped Fat Man on Nagasaki. Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945. Commander Kiro Honjo stood in the ruins of the Yokosuka arsenal. The captured B-29 had been destroyed in an American air raid weeks earlier. His 342-page report survived, locked in a safe. After the war, American intelligence officers found it. They were impressed by its thoroughness and accuracy. Honjo was not prosecuted for war crimes. Instead, he was hired as a consultant by the U.S. Air Force during the Korean War. He helped American engineers understand why B-29s were now vulnerable to Soviet MiG-15 jets. The technology gap had reversed. Captain Howard Jarrell survived. He and 5 crew members were liberated from Ofuna in August 1945, emaciated and traumatized but alive. 2 crew members had been executed in June 1945 as war criminals. Jarrell carried guilt over their deaths for the rest of his life. The photograph of Mary and Sarah was returned in 1952. The bombardier, Lieutenant William Chandler, had died in captivity. His daughter Sarah never knew her father. She was 3 months old when Ramp Tramp went down. The B-29 flew 31,000 combat sorties, dropped 171,000 tons of bombs, and killed an estimated 800,000 Japanese civilians and soldiers. It remained in service until 1960, flying missions over Korea and serving as the basis for the KC-97 tanker and the Soviet Tu-4 bomber, a reverse-engineered copy Stalin ordered built after 3 B-29s made emergency landings in Soviet territory. When Japan captured that single B-29 in November 1944, they discovered more than a flying factory. They discovered the future of warfare: technology, precision, overwhelming industrial power. It was a future Japan couldn't compete with. a future that would reshape the world in fire and atomic light. The age of strategic bombing had arrived, and it arrived inside those silver wings.